was having a conversation with Victoria, and we were talking about the music and setting up the program and all of this, and so much of this is just spontaneous. It's like whatever Spirit's going to bring through it, and even though I have an idea of what I want to talk about, I always know that when I step up here and I just begin to allow Spirit to come through, that it just starts to flow out in a way that no matter how much preparation I did, they're not always my words, that they are words of Spirit. And I want to thank you, Victoria, for that song this morning, because it really does fit in with this idea of where I want to talk about, and where I want to bring our consciousness to this idea that we are spirit first, that the human form that we show up in is just the vehicle that we're using, that as we play in this playground or this sandbox or in this life experience. This is the vehicle that we're using, but we're more than that. We're in this unlimited, eternal, infinite playground in which we get to be free. We get to run around and experience and express ourselves in not only in this universe, but possibly in multiple universes around the area. So I like to go into that place of consciousness in my mind that says that I can have the freedom to go anywhere that I want to go, to be anything that I want to be, to do all of the things that I want to do, and to be in that place of freedom and joy and happiness and love, because we know that this is the divine nature of who we are. Love is the ultimate experience of where we want to be. And when we look at the reading that's in the Science of Mind magazine for today, the title of the message is something to the effect of we need to learn to sing praise to all of that which is available to us, to rise up into a higher level of consciousness. And then it goes on to speak about what gets in our way, that we oftentimes get in this place of criticism, or as in the reading that Reverend Ann started with this morning, this idea of judgment. And we know that in the early, particularly in the early scriptures, it was very much matter of fact about the law. It was very much about judgment. It was very much about an eye for an eye, and it was in their mind, a time and a place where they set things down, and it was very black and white, and you didn't cross over that line, and it didn't allow for any of the freedom of expression that we want to have. And we know that as we have continued to evolve as a human species, that we are continuing to open up into this greater idea that there could be more freedom, more expression, more diversity, more inclusion, more tolerance, more love that we can give to the world. And as we do that, here's the caveat that comes with that. As we do that, everything else in the world that needs to be healed in order for that expression of freedom and love and joy to come into its place, all of that which is not like that has to rise up so that it can be dispersed and dispensed of. So if you find yourself in situations where there seems to be chaos, and there seems to be intolerance, and there seems to be this lack of love and understanding, it's only because we caused that, because we want something greater, we want something more, and in order to get there, we have to make sure that we're getting beyond that other stuff that's there. There is, in this teaching of the Science of Mind, this philosophy that we hold as our faith, and in a way in which we are trying to live. There is a understanding that there is a primary law of the universe, a primary law of life that comes down to that there really is cause and effect. that there is first cause. That is the divine, that is God, that is spirit, that is whatever you choose to call it. There is that first cause, and its nature is love. And out of love, it is creative. And so it continues to create eternally, infinitely, forever, always has and always will. Creating something even new, something greater, something yet to be. So that's the nature of the divine, is always in this place of creativity, and it's moving and it's having its way, and it's doing that through each of us individually. So in our own experience, in our own life, in our own personality, we are showing up in this place of creativity. We're out there throwing out our thoughts, throwing out our consciousness, throwing out our words, creating all sorts of stuff, and then we wonder why some of that stuff shows up in our life. And it has to do with the way in which we are presenting ourselves. So in that reading, the statement is, judge so that in a way that you don't also find yourself being judged. So if you're out there in that way of judging people in a very criticizing kind of manner, that's like, you don't like the way they think, you don't like the way they dress, you don't like the way that they, whatever it is that they do, you just don't like it. Maybe just because you just don't want to like it. And so what happens with that is that you have put out an energy. And that energy in this universal law of cause and effect is always going to come back to you. That's the nature of creativity. Whatever you put out there, it's always going to come back to you. So that's why we're always in this teaching, reminding people and cautioning people to be careful of what it is that you're asked for. And even though you may not be directly asking for it, you're not getting up in the morning and say, I want to have a really horrible, miserable day, But oftentimes we get up in the morning, and particularly if we haven't had our cup of coffee yet, we're not the most genial people in the world, So sometimes we start off on that wrong premise, and when we do that, we're setting in motion some energy that's going to come back to us. So we want to be cautious about that. We want to be, as prepared as we possibly can. That's why the first thing that I do, I have the Science of Mind magazine on my bedstand. And it's one of the first things actually I get my cup of coffee first. So I begin there. Then I grab my Science of Mind magazine and I read the daily guide. I want to put in my mind, I want to put into my thought something that's affirmative, something that's positive, something that starts me out on the right way, so that as I go through the day, because there are going to be challenges. And these last 2 weeks for me, I've had more challenges than I've ever imagined that I wanted to bring into my life experience. But they're there. And because I prepare myself, because I do my spiritual work, because I'm always trying to build my consciousness in a place of love, that I'm able to walk through these experiences. I manage to, and sometimes in a kind of a grumbling way, I continue to move forward through the experience to the best of my ability, because I'm knowing in the back of my mind that there is always some energy that's going out. And whatever that energy is that's going out, I want it to come back to me, increased and multiplied in the goodness of what is my intent, in the goodness of what I believe life can be all about. So I want to create that atmosphere that's around there. One of the things that I've managed to perceive out of this experience of the automobile accident that came through that is that, 3 years ago when I retired, well, it's been a little bit more than 3 years now, when I retired from the center in Palm Springs, I decided that I didn't need a big vehicle. I just needed an in-town, kind of to the grocery store kind of ride and back. I was even thinking maybe a golf cart would be perfect for me. And I bought that little Nissan, and then 6 months later I'm back working again, and not only was I working again, but I was doing a job that was requiring me every day that I went to work to drive like sometimes up to 120 miles a day. So I was putting a lot of time in this little golf cart in town kind of ride around car that was not comfortable and didn't have any of the bells and whistles, and although I was kind of aware of it, I wasn't really paying attention to how uncomfortable it was until I got hit by another car. And then I realized how uncomfortable. But the good thing that has come out of that is that I have a new car. It's like, and I'm so grateful. And I'm realizing in my drive over today how comfortable it was, how enjoyable it was. It's like I'm sitting up a little bit higher. I've got, wider seats. I've got armrest. I've got power control on everything. I've got, maps that show up. I've got this strange voice that talks to me all the time, I'm driving along, she goes, there's a wind warning, 26 miles. I'm like, really? It's like, so all of these things are happening, but the good that came out of that is that, I now have this very comfortable vehicle to drive in. So I looked back at the experience that I was having with my previous car, and I know that for the most part, I was not complaining about my car. So other than a few times here and there, for the most part, I wasn't complaining about it. I was grateful that I had a vehicle that was paid off, that was serving me. But there was that little nagging thing, that little nagging thought about, but it was not everything that I wanted. And so I moved to that place to now I'm having everything that I'm wanting and more. Some things I want to turn off and there. But it's a good, so it was a good metaphor to think about how we go about in life. There are things that we kind of just accept as we go along in life. It's like, well, it's good enough right now, that this is okay. Maybe it's not the best that I want, but at least it's what I have. And we're missing out on this possibility that we could have something even greater, that we could have something more, not for the sake of having something more, that we want more than what our neighbors want, or we want more than somebody else has, but that we are deserving to have all of the good that is ours. So I'm hoping you begin to see some of this shift in perception that I'm trying to bring about, that it's about having the potential that there is good that is available in the universe, because there is nothing right or wrong, that it really is all about everything just is the experience of what we're having. And if we can see it in the right perspective, if we can understand it in the right way, that there is an enormous, an unlimited amount of good that is available to us right here and right now, that we can have that experience, that we can enjoy it. And if we can open up our consciousness to that place of believing that and understanding that and trusting in that, then we can bring that to us. We can attract that to us. You've all heard of the law of attraction. We can attract that to us according to our consciousness. So the way to get there is to begin to start looking at, paying attention to, what is your consciousness? Are you in a place in mind to where you've decided that, oh, you're just going to accept what's good enough? Perhaps maybe you might want to be willing to accept that you are deserving and worthy of even something better, something greater, something more spectacular, something more abundant, something more prosperous, something more beautiful, something more joyous. That if we can be in that mindset that we here are the essence, the expression, the individualized point of reference of God, that we have that available to us to bring into our life experience all of that good that has already been created in the mind of God. It's already made available. All that we need to do is open up into our consciousness to know that we are already worthy and deserving of this, and that we truly can have that expression in our life. And we can get there by making sure that our thoughts and our words and our actions are not in that negative attitude. And that idea of a lot of criticizing, a lot of judgment, a lot of naysaying, a lot of putting down, because sometimes we do that because hopefully we think it'll make us look better or be better. But it doesn't. You look better or be better by doing that, being better, looking better, speaking better, behaving better, thinking better, not by putting somebody else down. So we want to get, and I know that it's always a challenge in a time when there's so much of the negativity going on, to not respond to that, not to react to that, but to try to move up to a higher level, to move into a greater sense of consciousness. In the reading in the Science of Mind magazine, it used the example of Ernest Holmes. All the readings this month are coming out of the writings of Ernest Holmes. And he spoke about a practitioner session that he had. Somebody that had come to him and said, you know, that it's like, I'm having a real challenge in my work. My supervisor criticizes me for everything, puts me down for everything, tells me I'm not good enough, tells me, and the response was, what you need to do is bless this situation. You need to look at your supervisor and look beyond the criticism and look beyond the negativity and see within that individual that they too are a child of God. They too are trying to get to that same place that we are. They too are trying to move through whatever challenges that they can. Bless that situation and just keep putting out your best. And then shortly thereafter, this individual was promoted out of that experience and became a colleague of that supervisor. They were moved into a different area and promoted into a greater experience. And now they have the opportunity to look at how they supervise others. And they can compare that to how they felt that they were supervised. So just in that shift in perception, that shift in looking at the situation and blessing it, as challenging as it may be, as difficult as it may be, as ugly as it may seem, as hard as it appears, but if we can first bless it and try to see beyond that it's just an experience of God that's going on in the world and the way in which people are using it, but that we can bless it and we can step into our consciousness so that we're bringing forth our greater good. And as we do so, we begin to influence all of those around us. Not only the people around us, but everything else around us begins to change. The atmosphere begins to change. The environment begins to change. There is so much good going on in the world today. We're not focusing on it. We're not paying attention to it. And we need to do more of that. As I look through my Facebook and I realize, if And that's why I try to send out many of those puppy dogs and silly cats and things that I can, because that's good that's going on in the world. Let's spend more time and attention on the good that we see and recognize, and promote that. Because every time you focus on the negativity, you're promoting it. Every time you react to somebody else's opinion, you're promoting it. You're giving it space. It's now taking up some kind of space in your consciousness. And you don't need that. And I'm sure you don't want that. You want to fill your consciousness with the love and the joy and the peace and the happiness. So begin posting more of the puppy dog pictures and the loving kind of things. Find places to bless that which appears not to be working. Because someplace in there, the divine is bringing forth the good out of it. And it may not be something that we'll ever see or recognize in our time, but it will. Everything in this universe is moving on that cycle and on that journey of the divine to the greater good that is yet to be, always moving forward. Ernest Holmes says that life is forever moving in an upward cycle, that we were spiraling upward into a greater consciousness, into a greater truth. And so that's where I want us to be. That's where I want this community to be. That's where I want each of us individually to be. And I know that we can be there. I know that we can do this. I know that we can always